This is truly a great honor, and I want to thank Dr. Furman and the trustees and my good friend Yolanda Celia Ruiz and all of you for making this great honor possible and for allowing me to share in this wonderful day of yours. Put my cheaters on. You know, I've been listening to politicians talk about the need to improve the public education system in this country, especially the education of our most disadvantaged youngsters for most of my adult life. Democrats and Republicans talk about it. Liberals and conservatives, Barack Obama and George W. Bush. We've had Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind and nonstop hand-wringing over the black-white achievement gap. I'm waiting for Donald Trump to weigh in, because at least then I'll know that whatever route he's taking, I should head in the opposite direction. What I do know, and what all of you know, is that we're in very serious trouble on the education front, and there's no doubt about that. And after so many decades of double talk, bad faith, and in some cases outright lunacy from people in high places, I've come to the inescapable conclusion that the politicians are not going to get us out of this fix. What we've allowed to happen to public education in this country is mind-boggling and deeply tragic. It cries out for wholesale change. Instead, the people in charge are cutting budgets and hacking away like mad at school services, while at the same time telling the public with a straight face that they're improving matters by obsessively testing students and taking every opportunity to demonize their teachers. I am proud to have the opportunity to speak at this wonderful ceremony today, because Teachers College is all about bringing the best that education has to offer to our young people. But I have to tell you, I look out at you guys and I almost see you as firefighters rushing to the scene to prevent the policymakers from burning down what's left of public education in this country. You've got a big job to do. We've got a disaster on our hands. And anyone who thinks it's limited to the stereotypical inner city neighborhoods or to Black and Latino youngsters is mistaken. Visit some of our rural areas and Rust Belt towns and cities, and you'll find young people who have dropped out of school, can't find a job, and are turning with dismaying frequency to drug and alcohol abuse. Crime and teen pregnancy, problems long associated with urban ghettos, are now big problems in these smaller, distressed communities. The prospects of these unemployed, undereducated young people are often grim indeed. The New York Times ran a front-page feature recently on a methamphetamine epidemic that is spreading misery through an economically depressed region of the Ozarks in Missouri. Marriage and stable family lives are going by the boards in many of these troubled communities. Children are being born to parents who are choosing increasingly not to marry and who in many cases can't afford to set up households of their own. What's the outlook for those youngsters? In his first inaugural address, Franklin Roosevelt told the American people, "This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly." Well, one of the major truths we need to face in 2011 is that in many respects, we've become an underachieving society, and education is one of those areas in which we've fallen down. The United States used to lead the world in the education of its young people. And yet now, when the need for a powerful first-class education system has never been greater, we seem as a nation to have given up on that. We can't find the money or the will to do the right thing. School budgets are being cut. Teachers are being let go. Libraries are being closed. Music and art courses are being eliminated as if they were unimportant luxuries that our children can do without. But just as our problems are not limited to the inner cities, they're not limited to education either. Education does not occur in a vacuum. It occurs in the context of the single biggest problem facing our country today, and that problem is its extreme and growing socioeconomic inequality. The United States is becoming a dangerously fractured society. On one side are those who are doing extremely well. That's a relatively small segment of the population, which includes the very rich, the bankers, the CEOs, the hedge fund managers. On the other side are those who are struggling economically and in many other ways. The poor, what we used to call the working class, and a substantial and growing portion of the middle class. Nearly 14 million Americans are officially classified as unemployed. Millions more are working part-time because they can't find full-time jobs. Middle-income jobs, jobs that would support a middle-class standard of living, are disappearing from our economy at an alarming rate. They're being replaced by low-wage, often dead-end jobs, which now make up more than 40% of the total employment economy in the U.S. 17 million Americans with a bachelor's degree or higher are working in jobs that do not require a college education. I'll get off the statistics in a moment, but I want to point out that 44 million Americans are poor, and it's believed that nearly 17 million are living in extreme poverty. Those are people trying to make it on incomes of $11,000 or less for a family of four. $11,000. That's destitution, and you know better than anyone how devastating that is for children being raised under those circumstances. The truth, frankly and boldly, is that ordinary Americans are hurting while money and political power is being concentrated in ever greater degrees in the gilded precincts of those already at the top. This is a crisis that is threatening not just the livelihoods of millions of American individuals and families, it's threatening the very character of the nation itself. Despite all the pretty talk about freedom and equality and the American dream, the levels of wealth and income inequality in the United States are by far the highest among all the developed nations of the world. As incredible as it may seem, the top 1% of Americans, the richest 1%, own more than the bottom 90% combined. That just shouldn't be. All of history tells us that extreme levels of economic inequality, the kinds of disparities that we're seeing in the United States right now, are harbingers of disaster. They destabilize societies. The last time wealth was concentrated to this extent in the United States was, not coincidentally, just before the Great Depression. Right now in the U.S., the middle class is shrinking and the ranks of the poor are growing. There is real suffering out there. The American dream itself is on life support. So where do you fit in all this? Well, I certainly appreciate your profound commitment to the education of our young people, but I would like you to do more. I don't want you to just teach the children of this society. I want you to fight for them. I want you to help us attack these grotesquely unfair wealth and income disparities. I have nothing against the rich. I wouldn't mind being among them myself, but I don't want them to leave everybody else behind. So we need your help to turn this devastating inequality around. You can start by paying even closer attention than you're paying now to what's happening in America. Think about all those workers who have gone under in the vast sea of unemployment. Think about the once solid middle-class families who have had to turn to food stamps and food banks, and the families that have had to double up with relatives or friends because their homes have been lost to foreclosure or a job loss made them fall behind in their rent. Think about the poor people who have been hammered so hard in this recession, and the millions of American youngsters in big cities and rural areas, in small towns and Rust Belt communities who are out of school, out of work, and all but out of hope. And then think about the kind of society you would like the United States to be. I don't think you want it to be a society in which the doors of opportunity are being slammed shut. And that's exactly what is happening now. When you fire up the wrecking ball for Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security at the same time that you're shielding the wealthy and the great corporations from having to pay their fair share of taxes, you're doing great harm to the ordinary working people, the struggling families of America. We're speaking the truth, frankly and boldly, and that's the truth. When we spend hundreds of billions of dollars fighting endless wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, while here at home, we're firing teachers, cutting school budgets, closing libraries, and letting the nation's infrastructure crumble before our very eyes, then we're doing great harm to the very fabric of this great land of ours. The problem is not that the American economy has been unable to produce enough wealth. The problem is that a tiny fraction of the people at the very top has cornered most of the nation's wealth. How did this happen? Is it because the very rich are so much more talented and work so much harder than everybody else? Don't you believe it? No, it's not because the rich are all geniuses. It's not that at all. The answer was neatly summed up by the political scientists Jacob Hacker of Yale and Paul Pearson of Berkeley in their important book, Winner Take All Politics. They explain the enormous and unfair tilt toward the very rich over the past few decades this way. Step by step and debate by debate, America's public officials have rewritten the rules of American politics and the American economy in ways that have benefited the few at the expense of the many. That's how it happened. With their outsized political influence, the very wealthy rewrote the rules, and we ended up with a country and an economy geared almost solely to their interests. You've got to help us turn this situation around. We cannot transform the system of education in this country without bringing an end to this extreme economic inequality. Now, I know many of you are already civically engaged, but I would urge you to become even more engaged. Consider devoting even more of your time and energy to public service. Form alliances with others who feel strongly about what is happening in this country, educationally and otherwise, and then use those alliances to bring pressure on our public officials, so many of whom are at the beck and call of the nation's moneyed interests. Let the world know that money isn't the be-all and end-all, that our human capital must come first, that our children deserve lives that are long and happy and exciting and satisfying, and that your commitment to serving the interests of those children will not be derailed by those whose interests are solely the bottom line. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your efforts, and you should be proud of the achievement that has brought you here today. Take a moment to smile and be happy about that. But keep in mind that this is not just your special day. This is also your era, your time to make your mark, to help fashion the society and the world that we all live in and that all of America's children will inherit. Keep that always in mind. Congratulations and good luck. Thank you. Thank you so much.